She didn't even get a scream out before the world flipped upside down. One hard yank on the rope around her ankles, and Lydia Moore left the ground, skirts flying, hair spilling toward the dust. The sun above Dodge City burned like a furnace. The whole prairie shimmered while she hung there, upside down, swinging from a rough wooden frame in the middle of nowhere, trying to understand how a simple morning inside her own home had turned into a nightmare she couldn't escape. Her husband had snapped again. Folks in town whispered that Tom Moore had a temper. They didn't know the half of it. They didn't see him tie the rope around her ankles while she kicked and begged him to stop. They didn't hear Lydia cry out when he hauled her up until her dress slid toward her shoulders and the blood rushed to her head. Tom's breath reeked of whiskey, and his eyes were wild and unfocused, like a man who had lost all sense of what was right and what was madness. Somewhere in the struggle, her thigh slammed against a splintered beam and tore open. Warm blood soaking through the thin fabric. Today his anger had gone further. Today he had left her hanging there under the open sky and warned her not to move a muscle until he said so. Then he rode off toward Front Street like nothing happened, like she wasn't even human. The heat pressed down on her. Her head pounded with every slow swing of her body. She tasted blood on her lip and the bitter dust that floated up from the ground beneath her. The rope bit into her ankles. Another coil dug into her wrists and waist, holding her tight against the rough wood. One eye was swelling shut. She felt like the whole world was shrinking to the sound of her own pulse. Time slipped by in slow, painful breaths. Dodge City was just a thin blur far across the flats, upside down and wavering in the heat. She wondered if anyone would ever help her at all. She didn't know it yet, but someone was already riding her way. Someone who was about to change the course of her whole life. That was when she saw dust rising on the horizon. A single rider, tall, steady, moving closer with a calm rhythm. The sun flashed against the metal on his saddle. For a moment, she feared Tom had come back to finish what he started. But when the rider came into focus, she recognized the face, Ethan Walker. The quiet rancher who never said more than he needed to. The man who often tipped his hat when passing her fence. The man her husband hated without reason. Her heartbeat jumped. She didn't know if she should call out or stay silent, and she didn't know what he would do when he realized the truth. Ethan slowed his horse the moment he saw her hanging there in the heat. Her dress was bunched around her waist, her legs bound tight to the frame. A dark patch of blood on her thigh. For a second he thought she might pass out right in front of him. He slid off the saddle and stepped closer, careful and steady, like he would approach a spooked mare on a bad day. Lydia tried to twist away, but the ropes only dug in deeper. Ethan stopped a few feet away. His voice was low and soft. He said her name once, just that. Lydia blinked, surprised that someone said her name like it mattered. Her throat tightened. She wanted to speak, but all that came out was a thin breath. Ethan reached up slowly, his hand open, ready to steady her if she swung too hard. He studied the knots, the way the rope crossed her legs and hips, the blood soaking through the cloth. If he was going to get her down without breaking her neck, he had to work close. Too close. He slid his hand along the rope at her thigh, searching for the right place to cut. His fingers brushed the bare skin just above the wound. Lydia sucked in a sharp breath, her face flushed with pain and embarrassment. Her voice came out in a shaky whisper. "Don't move your hand there. Don't take advantage." For a heartbeat, Ethan froze. Any passerby would see only a rancher with his hands under a woman's skirt out in the middle of the prairie. It was the kind of picture that could ruin a man. But then he looked at the blood, at the way her body trembled. He did the unthinkable. He ignored what people might say and did what had to be done. He gripped the rope, slid his knife in close to her skin, and cut her free. She dropped into his arms with a heavy jolt. The sudden rush of blood away from her head made her gasp. Ethan carried her a few steps and laid her gently in the grass. He tore a strip from the lower edge of her dress, tight around the wound on her thigh to slow the bleeding. Only then did he help her sit up. He handed her his canteen. She drank slow because her hands were trembling, and Ethan pretended not to notice even though he noticed everything. Two people who barely knew each other, yet somehow understood more in silence than most folks did in hours of talking. Lydia felt a strange sense of safety she had not felt in years. It scared her. It comforted her. It confused her. Ethan finally asked the question, sitting heavy in his chest. He kept his voice gentle. He asked her if someone had done this to her. Lydia froze. Her fingers tightened around the canteen. Her eyes shifted toward town, toward the house she had come from, toward the man waiting inside it. And the real question now was this. Would Lydia tell him the truth before it was too late? Lydia didn't answer Ethan right away. She held the canteen so tight her knuckles turned pale. The warm wind brushed past them, carrying the smell of dust and cattle from somewhere far across the flats. Ethan waited with the patience of a man who had seen too much in life to rush anyone. Lydia finally took a shaky breath. She whispered that she had fallen again, but her voice cracked and betrayed her before she even finished the sentence. Ethan didn't press her, though he knew the truth was standing right there between them. You can tell a lot from the look in a person's eyes. Hers showed fear, shame, and something else, something like hope, that maybe she wasn't as alone as she thought. Ethan saw all of it. He also saw the fresh marks across her arms and the bruise rising along her cheek. There are things a simple fall cannot do. Just as Lydia opened her mouth to speak, the distant rumble of hooves rolled across the prairie. Both of them looked up. A rider was coming fast from the direction of Dodge City. Lydia stiffened the second she recognized the saddle and the way the rider leaned forward. It was Tom. That alone made Ethan shift his stance, not to fight, but to be ready for whatever trouble was heading their way. Tom pulled his horse hard when he reached them. Dust exploded around his boots as he jumped down. His eyes locked on Ethan with a cold stare that made Lydia flinch. Tom asked what Ethan thought he was doing out here with another man's wife. He said a bunch of things in that sharp, mean tone of his, the kind of voice a man uses when he wants the whole world to know he's angry and wants the world to stay scared. Before Ethan could answer, Tom grabbed Lydia by the arm. She winced. That was all it took. Ethan stepped forward and told Tom to let her go. His voice was still calm, but there was no give in it. Tom laughed in that way drunk men do, even when they aren't drunk. Then he warned Ethan to stay out of his marriage. Lydia stared at the ground, embarrassed, scared, and desperate for someone to believe her for once. Ethan met Tom's eyes. He didn't raise his hands or threaten or shout. He only said one simple thing. He told Tom that hurting someone doesn't make